There are people who walk through the world differently. They don't just see what's in front of them. They feel what's beneath. They sense the unspoken weight in a room before anyone says a word. They know when someone is hurting, even when that person wears a smile. And they give endlessly because something inside them believes that their light can heal the darkness in others. But here's what no one tells them. Here's the truth that hides in plain sight, waiting to be seen. Not everyone who comes to your light comes to heal. Some come to feed. And the difference between the two will change everything you thought you knew about compassion, about love, about what it means to be truly awake in a world that's largely asleep. This isn't about becoming cold. This isn't about closing your heart or dimming your light. This is about understanding something far more essential, that the very gift that makes you capable of such profound connection is also the opening through which others can drain you empty. And they will. Not because they're evil, not because they hate you, but because your light is warm and they are cold and they've learned that standing near you feels better than learning to light their own fire. Let me show you how this happens. Let me walk you through the mechanism of it, the psychology, the invisible exchange that leaves you exhausted while they walk away somehow more alive. You meet someone, they're struggling. You can see it in their eyes, in the way they carry themselves, in the spaces between their words. And something in you responds immediately. It's not a conscious choice. It's deeper than that. It's wired into the very fabric of who you are. You want to help. You want to ease their pain. You want to show them that they're not alone in their suffering, so you give them your time, your attention, your energy. You listen to their stories, their problems, their endless cycles of drama and crisis. And at first, it feels meaningful. It feels like connection, it feels like you're doing something that matters, but then something strange begins to happen. They keep coming back. Not to update you on how they've grown, not to share how they've applied your wisdom, not to stand beside you as equals in the journey of life. They come back for more of what you gave them before, more comfort, more validation, more energy, more light. And you give it. Because that's who you are. Because you believe that if you just give enough, if you just love enough, if you just hold space long enough, they'll finally heal. They'll finally find their own strength. They'll finally learn to stand on their own. But they don't. And here's why. Here's the part that will break your heart before it sets you free. Some people don't want to heal. They want to feel better. And those are two entirely different things. Healing requires work. It requires facing the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. It requires taking responsibility for your patterns, your choices, your contribution to your own suffering. It requires change, real change, the kind that's uncomfortable and uncertain and demands that you become someone new. Feeling better just requires finding someone who makes the pain stop for a while, someone whose presence is soothing enough that you don't have to do the hard work, someone whose light is bright enough that you can stand in it and forget, temporarily, that you've never learned to generate your own. And if you're an empath, if you're someone who radiates warmth and understanding and compassion, you become the perfect refuge for people who want to feel better but have no intention of healing. They learn your patterns. They learn what makes you respond. They learn that if they show you their wounds in just the right way, you'll open your heart and pour yourself out for them. Again, and again, and again. And the cruelest part? They don't even know they're doing it. Most of them aren't consciously manipulative. They're not sitting in dark rooms plotting how to drain your energy. They're just following the path of least resistance. And you, with your endless capacity for compassion, have become their path. You've become their external source of what they should be generating internally. This is where the danger lives. Not in the obvious villains, not in the people who are clearly toxic, but in the ones who seem vulnerable, who seem like they need you, who seem like they're one conversation away from breakthrough. These are the ones who will consume you slowly, over months and years, leaving you wondering why you're so tired all the time, why you never have energy for your own dreams, why you feel simultaneously essential and invisible. Because that's the bargain. They need you to stay exactly as you are, available, compassionate, endlessly giving, but they can never see you, not really, because seeing you as a whole person with your own needs and limits and struggles would require them to consider someone other than themselves. And that's precisely the skill they haven't developed. So they see you as a function, not a person, a source, not a soul. And the tragedy is that you let them. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that your value comes from how much you can give, how much you can hold, how much you can endure. But here's what Thomas Merton understood, what all the great contemplatives have understood across time. There's a difference between compassion and codependency. There's a difference between love and enabling. There's a difference between holding space for someone's growth and becoming a crutch for their refusal to grow. Real compassion sometimes looks like stepping back. Real love sometimes sounds like no. Real wisdom sometimes means letting someone experience the consequences of their choices, even when watching them struggle tears at your heart. Because here's the truth that will either devastate you or liberate you depending on how ready you are to hear it. You cannot save anyone who doesn't want to save themselves. You cannot heal anyone who isn't willing to do the work of healing. You cannot light someone's path if they refuse to open their eyes. And trying to do so doesn't make you noble. It makes you complicit in their stagnation. It makes you a participant in the very pattern that's keeping them stuck. Think about it. Really think about it. That person who keeps coming to you with the same problem year after year, that friend who seems to live from crisis to crisis, always needing rescue, always needing support, but never actually changing. That family member who takes and takes and takes, but somehow never has anything to give when you need them. What are you actually giving them? Relief from discomfort? Yes. Temporary soothing? Absolutely. But growth? Transformation? Evolution? No. Because growth only happens in the space between comfort and crisis, in that fertile ground of necessary discomfort where we're forced to develop new capacities. And by rushing in to save them every time they approach that edge, you're robbing them of the very experience that could catalyze their transformation. There's a story I want to share with you, not because it's unique, but because it's universal. I once knew someone who could feel everything, every shift in the room, every unspoken tension, every hidden sadness behind every forced smile. She wore this sensitivity like both a gift and a wound, never quite sure which one it actually was. And she had this person in her life. A friend, or so she thought. This friend would call at odd hours, always in some new crisis, always needing someone to talk them down from whatever ledge they'd found themselves on this time. And she would answer. Every single time. She would drop what she was doing, cancel her plans, push aside her own exhaustion, and show up. For years this went on. Years. And every time the friend would seem so grateful, so moved by her compassion, so convinced that this time would be different. This time they would really change. This time they would take the insights and do the work and become the person they kept promising to become. But they never did. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, something began to shift in her. She started to notice that she had less energy for her own life, less patience for her own struggles, less capacity for her own joy. She had become so accustomed to operating in emergency mode for someone else that she'd forgotten what it felt like to simply exist in peace. One day, after yet another middle-of-the-night phone call, after yet another several-hour conversation in which she poured out wisdom and compassion and perspective, she hung up the phone and felt something she'd never felt before. Not satisfaction, not the warm glow of having helped someone, but emptiness, a profound, echoing emptiness. And in that moment, she finally understood. She wasn't helping this person, she was enabling them. She was providing just enough relief that they never had to face the real work of healing. She was being used as an emotional crutch, and she had allowed it because she had confused self-sacrifice with love. The realization broke her heart, not because she stopped caring about this person, but because she finally saw how little this person had ever truly cared about her. They had never asked how she was doing, never noticed when she was struggling, never offered to reciprocate even a fraction of the support she'd given. They hadn't seen her as a person. They'd seen her as a resource. And that's when everything changed. That's when she began to understand what real boundaries look like, what real self-respect demands, what real love actually is. She stopped answering every call. She stopped dropping everything. She stopped making herself endlessly available. And you know what happened? The friend got angry, accused her of abandoning them, told her she'd changed, that she wasn't the person they thought she was, that she'd become selfish and cold. And for a moment, the guilt nearly pulled her back in. That old familiar voice that said her worth was measured by her willingness to sacrifice herself, but she held steady, because she finally understood that losing herself to save someone else wasn't noble. It was just loss. The friend eventually drifted away, off to find another source to feed from, and she grieved that. Not because she wanted the friendship back, but because she grieved the years she'd spent believing that being drained was the same as being loved. But here's what happened next. Here's the part that matters most. In the space that opened up when she stopped giving herself away, she began to find herself again. She remembered what she liked, what she wanted, what made her feel alive. She had energy for her own projects, her own relationships, her own growth. She started attracting different kinds of people. People who wanted to know her, not just use her. People who gave as much as they received. People who celebrated her light instead of consuming it. And she realized something profound. All those years she'd spent thinking she was being compassionate, she'd actually been running from herself. It was easier to focus on someone else's problems than to face her own. Easier to be needed than to admit she had needs. Easier to play the savior than to acknowledge her own vulnerability. The real work hadn't been saving others. The real work was learning to stop abandoning herself in the name of love. This is the pattern so many empaths fall into, this endless cycle of giving and depleting and giving again, all while telling themselves that this is what it means to be a good person, that this is what compassion looks like, that this is their purpose. But it's not. Your purpose isn't to absorb everyone else's pain. Your purpose isn't to be a dumping ground for everyone's emotional chaos. Your purpose isn't to light yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your purpose is to live fully, to grow deeply, to become wholly yourself. And you cannot do that when you're pouring your life force into people who have no intention of reciprocating, no capacity for genuine relationship, no interest in your wholeness. There's another dimension to this that needs to be named, something that lives beneath the surface of these dynamics. It's not just that some people take more than they give. It's that some people have learned to seek out empaths, specifically because we're easy to exploit. They can sense us, our openness, our willingness to see the best in people, our deep need to be needed, our trained inability to say no, and they move toward that like moths to flame, not to transform, but to feed. And the most insidious part is how they do it. They don't come at you aggressively. They don't demand, they don't command. They come to you looking vulnerable, looking like they need exactly what you have to give, looking like if you just help them this once, everything will be okay. But there's never just once. There's always another crisis, always another emergency, always another reason why they need you right now, in this moment, regardless of what's happening in your life. And because you're an empath, because you can feel their pain, because you genuinely want to help, you override your own exhaustion, your own needs, your own limits. You tell yourself that you can rest later, that their need is more urgent, that you'd want someone to show up for you like this. But would you? Would you really want someone to drain themselves empty for you? Would you want someone to neglect their own life to prop up yours? Would you want to be in relationship with someone who had to betray themselves to be there for you? No, you wouldn't. Because that's not love, that's not real connection, that's extraction dressed up as intimacy. Real love is mutual, real connection is reciprocal. Real intimacy happens between two people who are both committed to their own wholeness and capable of meeting each other without one person collapsing into the other. But somewhere along the way, you learned a different definition of love. You learned that love means sacrifice, that it means putting others first, always, that it means making yourself small so others can feel big, that it means being endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly available. And that definition of love has been destroying you, slowly, quietly, completely. Because every time you override your boundaries to accommodate someone else, you send yourself a message that says your needs don't matter as much, that your comfort is less important, that your energy is less valuable, that you are less worthy of care and consideration than the people you give to, and over time that message becomes your truth. You start to believe it. You start to expect less. You start to accept treatment that would horrify you if you saw someone treating a person you loved that way. You become complicit in your own diminishment, and you call it compassion. But there's a word for giving beyond your capacity, for saying yes when everything in you is screaming no, for maintaining relationships that leave you depleted. And that word isn't love. That word is self-abandonment. And self-abandonment, in the name of helping others, doesn't make you a good person. It makes you a person who hasn't yet learned that you're as deserving of care as anyone you've ever helped. Let me tell you what happened when I finally learned this lesson myself. When I finally started to see the pattern, when I finally began to understand that not everyone who came to me with open wounds came with clean hands, I started paying attention differently, not just to what people said, but to what they did. Not just to their stated intentions, but to their actual patterns. Not just to the story they told about themselves, but to the reality they demonstrated through their choices. And what I saw shook me to my core. I saw people who claimed to value my friendship, but only reached out when they needed something. I saw people who said they cared about my well-being, but never once asked how I was actually doing. I saw people who took hours of my time and energy, but somehow never had time when I needed support. I saw the asymmetry, the imbalance. The fundamental inequity of relationships I had been telling myself were mutual, and I had to make a choice. I could keep pretending, keep making excuses for them, keep believing that if I just gave a little more, they would finally show up for me the way I'd been showing up for them. Or I could face the truth, that these weren't relationships, they were extractions. And I had been so desperate to be loved, so convinced of my own unworthiness, that I had accepted extraction and called it connection. Facing that truth was one of the hardest things I've ever done, because it meant admitting that I had been complicit, that I had trained people to treat me this way by never requiring reciprocity, that I had stayed in dynamics that were killing me because I was more afraid of being alone than I was of being used. But facing that truth also set me free, because once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And once I couldn't unsee it, I couldn't keep participating in it, so I started saying no. Not meanly, not with anger, but firmly, clearly, without guilt or apology or explanation. No, I can't talk right now. No, I can't help with that. No, that doesn't work for me. No, and you know what happened? Some people got angry. Some people disappeared. Some people accused me of changing, of becoming hard, of losing my kindness. And I let them. I let them be angry. I let them leave. I let them believe whatever they needed to believe about me to justify their own behavior. Because I finally understood something crucial. Their opinion of me was none of my business. My responsibility wasn't to manage their feelings about my boundaries. My responsibility was to honor my own limits, to protect my own energy, to tend my own soul. And that shift, that fundamental reorientation from people-pleasing to self-honoring, changed everything. The people who stayed were different. They were people who wanted reciprocal relationships, people who respected boundaries, people who understood that real love doesn't require self-destruction, people who brought their own light instead of trying to borrow mine. And with those people, I could finally be generous without being depleted. I could finally give without giving myself away. I could finally love without losing myself. But this isn't about them. Not really. This is about you. This is about why you do it. This is about the unconscious belief that if you give enough, you'll finally be worthy. If you help enough, you'll finally be valued. If you love enough, you'll finally be loved back in the way you've always needed. Except it doesn't work that way. It never has. People who are taking from you aren't suddenly going to start giving to you once they've taken enough. People who see you as a source aren't suddenly going to see you as a person once you've served them long enough. The dynamic doesn't transform, it deepens. And every time you say yes when your body is screaming no, every time you give when your soul is begging for rest, every time you override your own needs to meet someone else's wants, you're teaching them how to treat you. You're training them to see you as infinitely available, endlessly patient, eternally self-sacrificing. And you're teaching yourself that your needs don't matter as much as theirs, that your exhaustion is less important than their comfort, that your light exists to illuminate their darkness, regardless of what it costs you. But your light isn't infinite. Your energy isn't limitless. Your compassion isn't bottomless. You're a human being, not a healing machine. And there will come a day, if it hasn't already, when you look in the mirror and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. When you feel hollow, when you can barely remember what it was like to feel full, to feel alive, to feel like yourself. That's what happens when you give from your essence instead of your overflow. When you pour out your core instead of your surplus. When you let others feed on your light until there's nothing left for you. And the people who've been feeding? They'll move on. They'll find another source. They won't even realize what they've taken, because they never saw you clearly enough to notice when you disappeared. So here's the warning. Here's what you need to understand before you give one more piece of yourself away. Not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone has earned the right to your energy, your time, your emotional labor. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries. You don't need to justify protecting yourself. You don't need permission to stop giving to people who only know how to take. Your light is precious, it's rare, it's powerful, and it's yours, not theirs, yours. And the most radical act of self-love you can commit is to stop letting people who won't do their own work consume the energy you need for yours. To stop confusing depletion with devotion. To stop believing that suffering for others is the same as loving them. Because it's not. Suffering for someone who won't help themselves isn't love. It's self-abandonment. It's betrayal of the sacred responsibility you have to tend your own soul, to nurture your own growth, to honor your own journey. And here's what happens when you finally understand this. When you finally claim your boundaries, when you finally say enough. Some people will leave. They will accuse you of changing, of becoming cold, of losing your compassion. They will make you the villain in the story of their continued stagnation. Let them. Because the people who truly love you, who see you as more than a source, who value you as a whole person, they'll celebrate your boundaries. They'll respect your limits. They'll meet you with reciprocity, with mutual support, with balanced exchange. They'll nourish your light instead of consuming it, and you'll discover something miraculous. When you stop giving to everyone, you'll have so much more to give to the people and purposes that truly matter. When you stop letting others drain you, you'll have energy for your own dreams, your own healing, your own becoming. You'll remember what it feels like to be full, to be alive, to be yourself. This is the wisdom that Thomas Merton spoke of in different words. The understanding that solitude isn't selfishness, it's sanctuary. That protecting your inner life isn't cruelty, it's wisdom. That you can hold compassion for someone's struggle without making yourself responsible for solving it. You can witness someone's pain without absorbing it. You can care about someone's journey without carrying them through it. You can love someone deeply while refusing to participate in their self-destruction. This is what mature compassion looks like. This is what real love demands. Not the performative self-sacrifice that leaves you empty, but the boundaried generosity that flows from fullness, that gives from overflow, that knows the difference between supporting someone's growth and enabling their stagnation. And yes, it's harder. Yes, it requires saying no when yes has always been your default. Yes, it means disappointing people who've grown comfortable with your endless availability. Yes, it means being misunderstood by those who've benefited from your lack of boundaries. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is slowly dimming your light until you're just another person going through the motions, wondering where your life went, wondering when you stopped mattering in your own story. And you matter. You matter so much more than you've been taught to believe. Your needs matter. Your energy matters. Your dreams matter. Your joy matters. Your rest matters. Your wholeness matters. Not as much as everyone else's. Not less than everyone else's. Equally, exactly equally. There's something else that needs to be said here. Something about what happens in your body, in your nervous system, when you're constantly giving beyond your capacity. Because this isn't just philosophical. This isn't just emotional. This is physical. This is biological. This is your body trying to tell you something that your conditioned mind refuses to hear. When you override your limits repeatedly, when you give from depletion instead of overflow, Your body registers it as threat. Your nervous system goes into a chronic state of dysregulation. You might feel anxious all the time, or numb, or both, alternating between the two like a pendulum that never finds rest. You might develop physical symptoms, headaches, digestive issues, chronic fatigue, pain that moves around your body with no clear medical cause. Your immune system weakens. You get sick more often. You take longer to recover. And you tell yourself it's stress. You tell yourself it's just life. You tell yourself everyone feels this way, but they don't. People with healthy boundaries don't feel this way. People who honor their limits don't carry this level of physical burden. People who know how to say no without guilt don't live in bodies that are screaming for relief. Your body is trying to protect you from what your mind has been trained to accept. Your body is trying to save you from dynamics that your conditioning tells you are normal. And until you start listening to your body, until you start honoring what it's telling you, until you start treating physical exhaustion as the boundary violation it actually is, you'll keep pushing through, keep giving more, keep believing that your worth is measured by your capacity to endure. But endurance isn't a virtue when you're enduring abuse. And yes, letting people drain your energy without reciprocity is a form of abuse, even if they don't mean it. Even if they're not aware they're doing it, even if you're the one allowing it. The impact is the same, the damage is real, and your body is paying the price. So when you feel that exhaustion, that bone-deep tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, that's not weakness, that's wisdom. That's your body telling you that something is out of balance. That someone is taking more than you can sustainably give, that you need to stop, reassess and recalibrate. Listen to it, trust it, honor it. Because your body knows things your mind has been taught to rationalize away. Your body knows the difference between generous giving and self-betrayal. Your body knows when someone is nourishing you and when someone is feeding off you. And if you're constantly exhausted around certain people, if you feel drained after interactions that should be nourishing, if you need days to recover from conversations that should be mutual, your body is telling you something essential. It's telling you that the relationship is extractive, that the exchange is unbalanced, that you're giving from your reserves, not your overflow, and you have a choice. You can keep ignoring those signals, keep pushing through, keep sacrificing yourself on the altar of other people's comfort, or you can finally start honoring the wisdom your body has been offering you all along. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking that this sounds selfish, that if everyone just protected their energy and set boundaries, the world would be a colder, harder place, that someone needs to be willing to give more, to care more, to show up more. And you're right, someone does need to do that. But not you. Not anymore. Not when you've already given so much that you've forgotten what it feels like to be full. Because here's what actually happens when empaths start honoring their boundaries. Here's what occurs when sensitive people finally stop letting others feed off their light. They don't become less compassionate. They become more effectively compassionate. They don't have less to give. They have more to give because they're giving from surplus instead of deficit. They don't love less, they love better because they're no longer confusing depletion with devotion. And something else happens too, something crucial. When you stop enabling people's avoidance of their own growth work, when you stop being available as an emotional crutch, when you stop allowing extraction to masquerade as relationship, some of those people actually start to change. Not all of them. Maybe not even most of them. But some of them, faced with the reality that you're no longer available to prop them up, finally do the work they should have been doing all along. They find their own therapist. They develop their own coping skills. They learn to generate internally what they've been extracting from you. And that's the greatest gift you can give them, not your endless availability, but the opportunity to discover their own capacity, not your light, but the necessity of finding their own. You're not helping people by letting them feed off you. You're keeping them dependent. You're preventing their growth. You're participating in their stagnation while depleting yourself in the process. Real help looks different. Real help means being willing to let people struggle. Real help means holding space without fixing. Real help means believing in someone's capacity to heal themselves instead of believing you need to do it for them. And that kind of help requires something from you that enabling never did. It requires that you trust, that you let go, that you accept that you can't control outcomes, can't guarantee results, can't save anyone who isn't ready to save themselves. It requires faith, not religious faith necessarily, but faith in the process of growth, faith that people are more capable than we often give them credit for. Faith that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to participate in someone's self-destruction. That kind of faith is harder than rescuing, it's harder than fixing, it's harder than giving until you're empty, but it's also more honest, more respectful, more truly loving, because it sees people as capable beings having a difficult experience, not broken things that need you to fix them. It honors their agency instead of taking it away. It invites them into their own power instead of making them dependent on yours. And here's what you need to understand about the people who will be upset when you start setting boundaries, when you start protecting your energy, when you start requiring reciprocity in your relationships. Their upset isn't about you becoming less loving, it's about them losing access to a resource they'd grown accustomed to exploiting. They're not upset because you're being selfish. They're upset because you're no longer being self-sacrificing in a way that benefits them. They're not concerned about your well-being, they're concerned about their comfort. And that tells you everything you need to know about whether these are relationships worth preserving. Because the people who truly value you will celebrate your boundaries. They'll be relieved to know they haven't been unknowingly taking advantage of you. They'll want to ensure the relationship is mutual and balanced. They'll appreciate knowing your limits so they can honor them. Those are your people. Those are the relationships worth your energy. Those are the connections that nourish rather than deplete. Everyone else? Everyone who gets angry when you start honoring yourself? Everyone who accuses you of changing when you start choosing yourself? Everyone who disappears when you're no longer endlessly available? They were never really there for you anyway. They were there for what you could give them. And now that you're not giving it anymore, they're revealing exactly who they always were. Let them reveal it. Let them leave. Let them find someone else whose boundaries are weak enough to exploit. Because you're done being that person. You're done sacrificing yourself for people who wouldn't sacrifice their comfort for your well-being. You're done confusing self-abandonment with love. And until you can honor that truth, until you can protect that truth, until you can live that truth, you'll keep attracting people who want to feed off your light instead of people who want to dance in it with you. You'll keep giving pieces of yourself to those who have no intention of treasuring them. You'll keep wondering why you're so tired while watching others thrive on the energy they took from you. So this is your warning, your wake-up call, your invitation to something different. Stop letting people feed off your light. Stop confusing compassion with self-abandonment. Stop believing that your value is determined by how much you can endure. Your light isn't here to be consumed by others. It's here to illuminate your own path, to reveal your own truth, to guide your own becoming. And whatever spills over naturally, joyfully, without depletion, that's what you have to share. Everything else is theft. And you've been trained to call it love, but you're waking up now. You're seeing the difference. You're learning to discern between those who come to your light to grow and those who come to your light to feed. And that discernment will change everything. It will change who has access to you. It will change how you spend your energy. It will change what you're available for and what you're absolutely not. It will feel uncomfortable at first. Guilt will rise up. That old voice will tell you you're being selfish, that you're abandoning people who need you, that you're not who you used to be, and you'll have to let that voice speak and then choose differently anyway. Because that voice isn't wisdom, it's conditioning. It's the internalized message that your worth is measured by your willingness to disappear into other people's needs. But you're not here to disappear. You're here to become more fully yourself. And that requires saying no to everything that diminishes you. Even when it looks like love, even when it wears the face of need, even when it tugs at your heart with practiced precision. This is the great paradox of empathic awakening. To truly serve the world, you must first refuse to be consumed by it. To truly love others, you must first learn to stop abandoning yourself. To truly make a difference, you must first reclaim the energy you've been bleeding out in relationships that have no intention of healing. And when you do, when you finally step back from the edge of self-sacrifice and into the center of self-honor, something beautiful happens. You stop attracting people who need to be saved and start attracting people who are committed to their own evolution. You stop giving from depletion and start sharing from abundance. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable and start expanding into the fullness of who you actually are. Your light gets brighter, not because you're trying harder, but because you've stopped letting others dim it. And the people who are meant to be in your life will find their way to that brightness, not to consume it, but to contribute to it, to reflect it back to you, to celebrate it with you. This is what awaits on the other side of your boundaries. Not loneliness, not coldness, not the loss of your compassionate nature, but the reclamation of your power, the restoration of your energy, the return to yourself. And from that place of return, from that place of wholeness, from that place of honored self, you'll discover that you have more genuine love to give than you ever did when you were giving yourself away. Because real love flows from fullness. Real compassion emerges from wholeness. Real service springs from a soul that's been tended, not depleted. So tend your soul, protect your energy, honor your light. Not someday, not when everyone else is okay, not when you've finally given enough to earn the right to rest. Now, today, in this moment, because your light isn't for them to feed on. Your light is for you to live by. And everyone who's meant to share your journey will understand that. Everyone else is just passing through, and it's time to let them pass. This is your warning. This is your wisdom. This is your way forward. Stop feeding those who won't feed themselves. Start honoring the sacred light you carry. And watch how your life transforms when you finally understand that protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's the most generous thing you can do for a world that needs your light to shine, not flicker out. The journey ahead requires your full presence. Your dreams require your full energy. Your purpose requires your full capacity. And none of that is possible if you keep giving it away to people who see you as a source rather than a soul. So choose yourself, not instead of compassion, but as the foundation of it. Not instead of love, but as the wellspring of it. Not instead of service, but as the prerequisite for it. Choose yourself, protect your light, honor your boundaries, and let everyone who can't meet you there fall away like leaves in autumn, naturally, necessarily, making space for new growth. This is how you stop being consumed. This is how you reclaim your power. This is how you finally fully come home to yourself. And from that home, from that center, from that place of unshakable self-worth, you'll light the world in ways you never could when you were burning yourself out for people who never intended to carry their own flame. Your light was never meant to be borrowed. It was always meant to be witnessed, celebrated, and joined by those with lights of their own. So stop letting them feed, start letting yourself shine, and trust that the right people will find their way to you, not to take, but to share the light together. This is your final warning, and your first invitation to freedom.